Kacey Gregerson is a senior academic advisor at the University of Minnesota Twin Cities. Kacey is very invested in the advising profession and especially in retaining advisors. She serves as the inaugural chair of the Nakata Advising Community for Wellbeing and Advisor Retention and is also involved in Region 6. Kacey received the University of Minnesota's John Tate Award for Excellence in Undergraduate Advising in March 2021, which was and is a tremendous honor. Kacey lives in Maple Grove, Minnesota, with her husband, daughter, and curmudgeonly dog, and loves finding new running routes in the Twin Cities metro area as she trains for the Twin Cities Marathon. Kacey, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Matt. It's good to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you on. And I know we're going to have a lot to talk about. I know later on we'll be talking about a certain type of podcast called Nakata Presents that you've been a part of, and you have a series going on with that. But maybe we'll start with, telling us a little bit about yourself and your path into higher ed and academic advising.
All right. So I am a first generation college student. I went to the University of Wisconsin, Eau Claire, which was about 3 hours from my home. So I'm originally from a small town in Minnesota, Winthrop. And it's small to the point where I graduated with like 90 some students and did not want to go to a school that any of those those classmates were going to be attending. Just needed a fresh start, and found Eau Claire and really got involved in housing and residential life right away. And became an RA or resident assistant, and was involved in like student activities and programs, and had some wonderful mentors there who told me about this, unique path in life of going into student affairs. So I then went to Minnesota State Mankato, and I was a graduate assistant in student conduct. And I enjoyed it, and thought like, okay, this is definitely what I want to do. I can really make a difference here. And then did an internship in advising, and I enjoyed that as well, but I don't think I really had the full breadth of what you can do with advising in just a 10-hour-a-week internship. So my first job out of graduate school was at the University of Alabama down in Tuscaloosa. And it was in student conduct, or they called it judicial affairs at the time. And I enjoyed it, but a lot of it was like meeting with students who would try to sneak alcohol into Bryant-Denny Stadium. So it was not quite as rewarding, I think, as I originally thought it could be. But I also knew that it was like my first year out of graduate school. But as happenstance goes, before I moved down to Alabama, I met my husband, or now husband. I picked him up at a bar in Minneapolis. And he had just bought a house. And this was 2008. And we all know the economy just took a huge tumble. And so I wanted to be with him. So I found a job up back in Minnesota at Anoka-Ramsey Community College, and it was in advising. And it was kind of tough with a lot of drop in advising, and then eventually made my way to the University of Minnesota. But so it's been kind of small pockets, I guess, is how I would put it, until I got to the University of Minnesota. And I started in College of Liberal Arts, and now I'm in chemical engineering and material science, and I'm almost to 10 years at the U. So,
Wow, that's awesome. I mean, yeah, it's almost like you followed love to where you were at.
Yeah, that's a good way. So, yeah, and I've always told people that one thing I really like about advising is you welcome repeat business, whereas in student conduct, if you saw the same person again, you're like, oh, it didn't stick, did it?
Yeah, because when I think of student conduct, I'm like, oh yeah, that's where someone did something, maybe did something bad, or you got to deal with the consequences. But you were mentioning that you went from liberal arts to, you said chemical sciences?
Chemical engineering and
Engineering?
material science. Yep.
Yeah. How was it being an advisor in liberal arts, liberal studies, and then also then transitioning to chemical engineering?
Yeah. So it's been interesting in that a lot of times in liberal arts, I was working with students who were interested in like medical school. And so it was high achieving students. And then m- moving over to chemical engineering and material science, it's also pretty high, high achieving students. One of the things that has really struck me is the being in the department. I really get to know the students quite well because I'm like their go-to person for 2.5 years, and they are so appreciative of what I do. And I think part of it is because sometimes I don't know that their mind thinks the way mine does, being a liberal arts grad and everything. So I think so that's been kind of an interesting change. And I noticed that right away that the students were just really appreciative of like that I check their degree audit report consistently. So
Yeah, and so you mentioned a little bit about being an advisor in chemical engineering, but as a senior academic advisor, what does that mean for you in terms of like what's your day to day like?
it depends on the time of year. So right now I'm meeting with a lot of students who are recently admitted to the program. Um, so I meet with the chemical engineering students in the spring after they've been admitted, and then I'll start meeting with the material science students in the fall. Um, with my role as being in a department, I do a lot of work also with faculty. So, which has also been helpful in just seeing what they is, and the faculty in chemical engineering and material science are very much trying to make sure that the students succeed. And they're also they've gotten a lot more invested in like mental health and becoming mental health advocates, which is a program we have on campus. And so I think that's probably a big difference between what my role is versus some of my other colleagues at the University of Minnesota is that I do a lot of work with faculty and like making sure that we're meeting ABET accreditation, which is the accreditation for engineering programs, and also like I do a lot of work with scholarships as well. So I get to give away close to $300,000 just in our department, which is fantastic to be able to provide that to students. So
That's fascinating. And being able to do that, and then basically making the students' dreams come true, where then now they can actually use that. And I'm assuming the scholarship they're using it to like pay for their tuition and
mhm.
campus fees and all that.
Yeah. So yeah, we have some generous alumni in our department, which is wonderful.
Sounds like. I'm like, can some of those come to my institution?
Yeah.
And speaking of institutions, you're at University of Minnesota Twin Cities. So if someone wanted to know a little bit more about your institution, how would you describe it?
Yeah, so we're a land grant institution. Um, the Twin Cities campus is interesting in that it was like two schools that basically merged together to form the University of Minnesota Twin Cities. And the other probably like random fact that people find I always find fascinating about the University of Minnesota is that we were created before Minnesota was a state. So like the legislator can recommend things, but it's kind of up to us. And of course we want to follow it because we need the funds. But I always find that an interesting little factoid to throw in there. So it's a Big Ten institution, and it's like right in the heart of Minneapolis. And then there's the St. Paul campus, which is very picturesque, and it's near the state fairgrounds. So another fun fact is that we cannot start our school year until after Labor Day because the state fair is so huge in Minnesota. And then with being in Minneapolis and St. Paul, there's just a lot of unique opportunities for students because 3M is here, General Mills is here, Estee Lauder is around here too, and Cargill, and so there's a lot of like really nice businesses that are right around the campus that students can take advantage of. So.
Yeah, a lot of cool little factoids there.
I really love random facts.
Oh, I do too. Oh no, that was awesome. And speaking of also working at University of Minnesota Twin Cities, like you also won the John Tate Award in undergraduate advising. And so from what I read, it's university staff and faculty who actively participate in academic advising or career development are the ones that are eligible for this award. And it's the process, they say, is very prestigious and competitive. And so nominees must demonstrate an excellence in the core advising skills and methods, and also being an ally, an advocate, cultural navigator, building relationships. How did it feel to win that award?
It was amazing. I was nominated. I think that was my second time being nominated, and it's a pretty intense process because I had to find someone nominated me and wrote a pretty long letter, and then we also had to find letters of support, and so we found those, and I had some students write some things that was just heartwarming to hear. And then I also had to write a statement as well. And when it was hearing what some of the students wrote and having that read out loud during the ceremony was, I've always loved advising. I've always known this is like the right career for me, and then to hear that like a student, I think she wrote like, I always feel better after I've talked to her than when I got there. And it just reiterates the importance of the role that we do, and that students notice and they know the work that we put in for them. And so it was an amazing feeling to be recognized for the work that I love doing.
Yeah, well, congratulations on that
Thank
award.
you.
Yeah. And yeah, like you're saying, students, they know, and they're watching, and they know those that are making a difference, those that care about them. And so they saw that and probably still see that in you. And so that's an amazing, honor to receive that award. And yeah, congrats again.
Thank you.
Yeah. And one of the things too, speaking of advising, is, you're also very involved in Nakata. Can you talk about some of the things that you've been involved in, whether it's at the global level or within Region 6?
Yeah, so I am chair of the advising community for well-being and advisor retention. And I also, with the help of especially Jake Rudy and the other folks on the steering committee, we started that advising community. So we went through the process of creating it and getting the support for it and everything. And we became official in March of 2020. So that was exciting and a long process, but the end result has been great. And I'm also the communications and awards chair for Region 6, which has been a lot of fun. And I am hoping to be the chair for Region 6. We'll see once the elections are done. So, and then I've also been involved with the membership recruitment and retention committee. So, one thing with the advising community for well-being and advisor retention that started actually because of region being at the Region 6 conference. So they did the conversation with Nakata leaders, and Amy Sands was the president of Nakata at the time, and she was also a chair of Region 6 at one point. And so in the meeting, I was on the cusp of burnout, and I said, I just think Nakata needs to be considering the advisors, and we need to retain good advisors, and we need to be thinking about their well-being and offering them support. And so she wrote in, she used to do a Fridays with Nakata column, and like right before Memorial Day, and I think a lot of people were maybe just waiting for the clock to tick to when they could leave on Memorial Day. And she wrote that we wanted to start this, and oh my goodness, did we get a response. So I know other advisors were feeling it, and so it's been great to see the support and interest and people invested in that community.
Yeah, and it's almost, yeah, like you're saying, there was a need for it, and then there was support for it, and then it got created. But a lot of the advising communities, when maybe someone starts as a new Nakata member, the advising community is already there.
Mm-hmm.
So you actually got to kind of go from start to the actual creation of it. How was that? In terms of like, how long was that process?
Yeah, so that was when I went to that conversations with Nakata leaders. That was in spring of 2018, I believe. And so then that Nakata conference was in Phoenix. And so we were kind of trying to drum up support. So going to sessions that we thought people might be interested in this advising community, and, talking to folks. So from 2018, and then in 2019, we were a potential advising community. So we got to participate in the fair, and that was Louisville. And then we became official in March of 2020. So, which was also very much happenstance with a lot of life changing in March of 2020 when the COVID outbreak happened. So.
Yeah, and it's almost though like you had to put all that work into it, to have those conversations, to go to these different sessions. And at any point from 2018 to 2020, like you could have just given up and be like, this is gonna be too much. But you followed through with it, and now you have this advising community, which I think is fascinating.
Yeah, yeah, it was it was a lot of work, and so because of that, I've basically been chair in a way since 2018. So so yeah, I think it'll be really good for the community. I know we have, as far as I know, the slate isn't out yet, but the people I nominated to be chair of it for this next cycle, I know it will be in great hands. And it's a little weird to think about not being the chair of it, just because I've always been.
Right.
But it'll be great to see what someone else can do with it.
Yeah, and I'm sure you're still going to be some part of it. You're still going to be doing something with the advising community, but yeah, to be doing it in a sense, from 2018 to now, and then have someone else come in, that could be a little weird because you've been doing it for so long.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, they won't get rid of me too easily. I'll still definitely be involved.
And what would you say like the goals of the advisor wellness and retention advising community are?
So we definitely want to try to encourage research and some writing with Nakata within well-being and advisor retention. So I know Olivia Miller and Liz Sutton and CJ, and I can't remember everyone else who's on the research committee, but they have been working hard to just get people aware that like we need to be talking about well-being for advisors. And so there's a lot in like social work and um, healthcare, of course, on like well-being for that population. And so it's really like because we're also in a helping population or profession,
Mhm.
um, we really think there needs to be some discussion about the well-being and retention of our profession as well. We also try to just provide space for people. So with our Munch and Learns, we have Feel Good Fridays. And so every Friday you can just hang out, or not every Friday, every first Friday of the month you can hang out in a Zoom room. And we might have some topics for conversation, but it's basically to provide that space for advisors. I also think thinking about students' well-being is really important too. And so think how are we creating that space in our advising appointments to check on how students are doing. And that can be mental health, but it can also be our basic needs met, because if those aren't met, then uh, the student's definitely not in a healthy and well place. So those are broadly just some of the things we have been trying to work on within the community. I also think just looking for different resources. So if folks join the listserv, I try to do a monthly newsletter, and I always have some article or podcast or something that I highlight as a resource. But there's definitely a lot of other ones out there, and they're linked on our webpage.
Yeah, and you mentioned podcasts, and so I think that's a good transition into something called Nakata Presents, which is the official Nakata podcast series. And so it brings together different advising communities, and they kind of have a series that they'll do for a few episodes. And your advising community has been a part of it. How did that come about?
Yeah, that was surprising. So Karen Sullivan Vance from the Nakata Executive Office mentioned that they had started this series with the first generation advising community. And so I listened to that, and Quentin Alexander, he did a fantastic job. That was a little intimidating to listen to because he left some big shoes to fill. So yeah, so Karen reached out and asked if we would be interested, and so I took it to the steering committee, and it was a resounding yes. Let's try this out. So we came up with what we wanted to do with the series, and so the episodes, it starts with what is well-being and how do you consider well-being in advising. The second episode is about gratitude, positivity, and toxic positivity, which was really interesting just in navigating what can sometimes be um, lines in the sand almost of when is it gratitude versus when it can become toxic positivity, but also just being mindful of yourself and like considering gratitude in your advising practice. We also talk about students and well-being, um, DEI and well-being, so diversity, equity, and inclusion work and well-being, and that one is very much advisor focused. And then we talk about advisor retention and burnout, and then we wrap up the series by asking where do we go from here. So the people that have been serving on who have been panelists for it have been fantastic. So
Yeah, and we'll include the link to Nakata Presents in the show notes. And otherwise, if you want to go on Amazon Music or Spotify, you can find it there as well. But a question, I guess, with having this podcast series and for your advising community, I guess this will kind of be like the selling point. Like, for you, like, why is it important, or why should members, Nakata members, check this out?
Ooh, that's a good question. So, and I mentioned this in the first episode of this series, that like the advising community kind of started out of desperation, in that I was nervous that I might have to find a new career, basically. And I desperately did not want to, because I do love advising, and I think the advising profession it's given me so much, and I want to continue to give back to it. And so I think, to me, people should check it out, so to start considering, or to continue to invest in themselves and considering their own well-being, and maybe figuring out how we can better the profession to really encourage advisors to think about themselves sometimes, because as I kind of alluded to earlier, with advising being very much a helping profession, I think advisors fall into a trap of not considering their own health and well-being. And to me, the fact that we're having this conversation, and that we have a 6 episode podcast series about well-being, tells me we really need to be having these conversations and be thinking about advisors and their well-being and how we can retain them, because I also think we desperately want to and need to retain good advisors in this profession.
Yeah, I agree that a lot of us probably don't really think of ourselves to take care of ourselves, or we put it off, like, oh, I'll take care of that after this peak season's over, and then the peak season is all year.
Yeah, I remember this was years ago, when my daughter, who is almost 7, she was in the infant room at daycare, and her teacher came up to me, when I was picking her up, and she's like, "And how are you? How was your day?" And I like took a step back. I'm like, "Oh my gosh, that's like the first time someone's asked me that today." Because you have 8 appointments in a day, and it's, "How are you? How's it going? How are classes? What can I help you with?" And so when she was like, "And how are you today?" I was like, it's been kind of a tough day. You don't have to keep that in, but
oh no, I will keep that in.
Okay.
But I mean, it's like a simple question, but we don't really think about it that often.
Yeah.
And to really even like reflect on it, like, how am I actually doing right now?
Yeah. And that's not to say, as I talked about at the beginning, like, students are fantastic, and they notice what we're doing and everything. But I always think it's so kind when students will take a moment to like send me a little note that's like, "And thanks for doing that for me." Or like, one in November, my family had COVID, and I had to reschedule a student appointment, and I explained, like, my daughter at the time, I think I thought only Eliana would have it, but then and the student, I had emailed saying, my daughter is sick, so I can't be in. And she wrote back saying, like, "How are you? How is your family doing? I hope you're all recovering." And I'm like, that was just really sweet of you to think about us, and to acknowledge the humanness of your advisor.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it, the humanness of it. And with these podcast episodes, you end each episode by asking your guests what they're listening to and what they're reading, which I think is really cool to do. And what brought that on to ask that question to your guests?
So part of it is I enjoy Unlocking Us with Brene Brown, and she always does. I think she asks for the top 5 songs on their playlist or something like that. I also think it's nice to, again, kind of the humanness of us as advisors. So, like, when you're not advising students, what do you enjoy reading and what do you enjoy listening to? So, I love music. I've played piano pretty much my whole life, and we always have something playing in the house, whether it's classical or jazz or Taylor Swift radio or whatever. So music is such an important part of my life. And so I always find it interesting to hear what people are listening to, or podcasts. So but yeah, so I just think it kind of gives another side to people to know what they're reading at that moment or what they're listening to. So.
Yeah, and whether it's books or music, I mean that connects us all. And
Mm-hmm.
when you're mentioning music being very important for you and playing the piano, I just kept thinking about like, oh, you should talk with Craig McGill.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, he's all about music and piano and all of that.
I another advisor on campus, in their signature line they had like what I'm listening, or my playlist or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so now I send a weekly email to my students, and I have just a Google spreadsheet where it's like Kacey's playlist. So I do a song of the week. And that's been so fun, because then I've had a couple of times where students have said, oh, you should put this one in. And so like I had some 80s song, and a student, an international student, sent me a different version of that song from, I think, South Korea. And so that was my next song of the week. So it's been fun to share that side of myself with them. So.
Oh, that's really cool. And see, like I said, music connects everybody.
Yeah. I always wonder what they think when, like, if it's more of a somber song versus like I had like California Love by Tupac one week.
Right. Well, I guess it just depends on the day and how someone's feeling and what connects with them, what they want to listen to.
Yeah.
So it's kind of good having that variety of different songs.
Yeah.
Now, we were talking earlier about your advising community and kind of how you're the inaugural chair for that, but also in a way you were the inaugural first guest of Dane's Desk with Dane Zanowski on our YouTube channel for Adventures in Advising. So that's where Dane does short interviews with advising professionals. And so you're the first episode that got posted, and that was on advising philosophies. So can you share your advising philosophy?
Oh boy. It's been a minute since I did that. So my philosophy always comes from Schlossberg's, whoa, that's a blast from the past, mattering versus marginality versus mattering. I think that's the title of that theory. I always want students to feel or know that they matter. And my philosophy has definitely deepened in my resolve to make sure students feel that they matter in the work I've been doing in racial justice and diversity, equity, and inclusion, because I want every student to feel that they belong. And so, yeah, that's the cusp, I would say, of my advising philosophy is ensuring that students know that they matter and feel that they matter versus feeling marginalized. I also always want to provide compassion and empathy to students, and I know that can easily tip into like pity or sympathy, but I want students to know I'm not afraid to go there with them. And so I'm always mindful of providing that compassion and empathy versus the pity and sympathy of like, oh, I'm I'm sorry you didn't pass that class, and staying like back here instead of like being there with them. Um, and that kind of, with that, I would say I'm also careful of like the boundaries, of course, and making sure I don't go into counseling, because I am more than willing to refer students, um, but also boundaries and making sure I don't take their issues home with me. And when I was in graduate school, it was a counseling based program. And one of my professors always used the analogy of like, this is your hook. And she would hold her finger out. And so your hook can carry your issues. It can't carry anyone else's. And I've always thought of that. I maybe didn't always practice it, but I around 2018, when everything was kind of happening with the advising community and I was on the cusp of burnout, I started seeing a therapist, and she's definitely helped me in understanding those boundaries and still being willing to go there with students, but knowing that I don't need to take that on myself. So.
Yeah. And, just you saying like making sure that students know that they matter. I think we've kind of heard this advising philosophy throughout this interview, and you basically are living what your advising philosophy is. And if to kind of now transition towards the end of this interview, one of the things that you're training is for a marathon. How's that going?
Well, we have a high of 6 today, so um, this will be my third marathon this year, and I think in fall of 2018 I did the Twin Cities Marathon, and it was so much fun. I loved every moment of it, and so this will be the 40th running of the Twin Cities Marathon, and so in October they're like, first to the 40, you can sign up now. And I looked at Aaron and I'm like, I mean, should I do it? And he's like, if you want to. And I'm like, well, I want to. So I think I just have to sign up and start training again. And so, yeah, so it's running is a great release for me. And it's a way to collect my thoughts and complete the stress cycle, if you will, which is from the book Burnout. and so it's also just kind of time for myself, and we have wonderful trails in the Twin Cities metro area, and so it's been fun to find those. And it's also weird sometimes to be driving and be like, oh, I ran over here just the other day. And but yeah, I'm looking forward to getting those miles in again, which is weird to say, because a 20-mile run on a Saturday is not how a lot of people want to spend their day, but it's a lot of fun. And I know that some runners are like, oh, I don't listen to music or I don't listen to podcasts while I run. And I do. And it's fun to find the music that kind of gets me a little bit more excited. And yeah, so.
Yeah, that's awesome. And to each their own, that if they don't want to listen to music or podcasts, they don't have to.
Exactly.
But if anyone has any questions on anything that was said today, or have follow-up questions, or want to get in touch with you, how can listeners reach out to you?
Yeah, so they can send me an email. I'm Kgregers, Kgregers at umn.edu. They can also find me on Facebook. Specifically, look for the Facebook group for the advising community for well-being and advisor retention. We welcome everyone there. So Yeah, so I'd love to follow up with people, or if you want to talk more about running, music, reading, or whatever. So
Sounds good. Thank you so much, Kacey, for being on the podcast.
yeah, thanks for having me.